there's so many things happening at the same time. Failure of a government. No one trusts our institutions. People are atomized. People are becoming nihilistic because there's nothing to look forward to in their lives. And instead of focusing on how we can solve these issues, everyone's obsessed with, is it a D or is it an R? Is it a leftist or is it a right-wing extremist? Democrats versus Republicans. And I'm just done with the political hackery.
This morning, growing questions and fallout from the deadly shooting at an ICE field office in Dallas. Multiple senior law enforcement officials identifying the suspect as 29-year-old Joshua Jahn. His brother told NBC News Jahn didn't have strong feelings about ICE and wasn't interested in politics on either side as far as he knew.
And that he was not a marksman, that's for sure.
We're learning some new details about Joshua Khan and the act that he carried out yesterday in a ICE facility in Dallas, Texas. Now, his act of violence tragically killed one person and wounded two others. Jahn later took his own life. However, there's been much to be made about what the political ideology of this individual is, what motivated him to carry out this act of violence and essentially indiscriminately shoot at a transport vehicle near the facility. So here's what we know as the story has developed today. Leaders in the Trump administration, including Donald Trump himself, are once again using this horrific instance of violence as an excuse to issue threats against the left as a whole, which I think is insane, especially as someone who's certainly somewhere on the left. But when you think about how fractured and how much disagreement there is on the left, what does this even mean? But nonetheless, their reaction, meaning the Trump administration's reaction, was based on the fact that the words anti-ICE were scribbled onto one of the shell casings recovered from the scene, and that's according to the FBI. Now, there's so much distrust in our institutions that some are even questioning whether the shooter himself had written anti-ICE on the casings. We have no reason to believe otherwise, so until something else develops, I'm going to go ahead and just share that photo with you, tell you what the FBI is saying. But today, Nancy Larson, the acting U.S. attorney for the Northern District of Texas, revealed more about what law enforcement happened to find at the shooter's residence while executing a search warrant. So take a look at that.
First, I want to point out that one of these notes or papers, the sniper explicitly states, yes, it was just me. These loose notes included a game plan of the attack and target areas at the facility. He called the ICE employees people showing up to collect a dirty paycheck. He wrote that he intended to maximize lethality against ICE personnel and to maximize property damage at the facility. He hoped to minimize any collateral damage or injury to the detainees and any other innocent people. He also hoped his actions would give ICE agents real terror of being gunned down, and he did this to induce constant stress in their lives. He hoped his actions would terrorize ICE employees and interfere with their work, which he called human trafficking.
So this is what the authorities claim they have found, and clearly, based on these pieces of evidence that were just detailed in the video you watched, this guy clearly despised ICE. However, there is contradicting reporting. There's other evidence that paints a much more complicated picture of who Joshua Jahn was. So it suggests that he could probably be best described as a chronically online nihilist who did not exhibit the kind of leftist extremism many are suggesting. For example, NBC News spoke to his brother, Noah Jahn, who didn't believe that Joshua had any strong political leanings whatsoever. Independent journalist Ken Klippenstein, also a friend of the show, spoke to three people who knew him, at least in middle school, since at least middle school, I should say. And according to Ken, they said that when it came to Jahn's politics, he was vaguely libertarian and seemed to hate both major parties and politicians in general, and that includes Donald Trump. But they also noted that he didn't really engage in much politics beyond that. He preferred edgy humor, video games, and the message board 4chan, all of which he became increasingly steeped in as he withdrew from social life as well as their own friendships several years ago, they said. So he withdrew from their friendship several years ago. That's what his friends since middle school are telling Ken Klippenstein. And what's absolutely clear is that he had an extensive online profile, so that should be helpful in this investigation. He has at least 2 Reddit accounts where he talked about video games, cars, South Park, and marijuana. And his profile on the gaming platform Steam showed that he spent thousands of hours playing video games. I'm not mentioning that to indicate or imply that I think video games made him violent, so I want to be clear about that. But what about the message on the casings? Well, none of his former friends believe that the anti-ICE inscription could possibly be sincere, feeling such a serious political statement was anathema to who Han was. His humor was deeply ironic, often offensive, and aggressive to the point of alienation. For example, one of his friends showed Ken a Facebook post describing how Han had flooded his friend's comment section with rape jokes. Quote, playful shock and humor, end quote, a friend said. Cenk.
Yeah. So there's definitely one troubling trend in the country, and maybe 2. So the one that's clear is these shootings. What the hell's going on? So why are people all of a sudden on every rooftop? And look, for a long time it was the right wing that did the overwhelming majority of the crime, political crime, not crime overall, right? So political violence, etc. Now you can catch feelings over that, but they're stats; they're indisputable. You can continue to dispute them, but there's no question. But now, all of a sudden, the Trump assassination attempts, this ICE shooting, Charlie Kirk. Now we got political violence everywhere, right? So, and these set of folks then lose the moral high ground for everyone on the left. And I don't think that's fair. But then the right wing gets to say, hey, that idiot that smashed in Paul Pelosi's head, he doesn't lose us the moral high ground either because I didn't tell him to do that. We didn't vote for that, right? And maybe we can begin to realize, like crazy people on both sides do violence not because they're on the right or the left, but because they're crazy.
100%.
Right? And that literally 99.99999% of both the right and the left never do violence. Okay. So, but when the folks do violence, it is haunting and it is terrorizing. And so obviously I understand why people are very worried about it. And I don't see people encouraging violence on the left, but I might be missing it. I might be there. There might be other people doing it. Certainly, as you guys all know, Tucker Carlson was very nice the other day when I was on his show. He acknowledged Young Turks has a history of 20 straight years of advocating nonviolence. So we're super duper clear on it. It's counterproductive, it's immoral, et cetera. Now, the second thing is the loss of faith in institutions, right?
Yes, that's the bigger issue here.
Yeah.
Not only for our purposes and wanting to convey accurate information to our audience, and I feel like that's becoming more and more challenging, but the lack of faith in our institutions is also part of a broader issue I'm seeing with the nihilism among young people. And the feeling that they have nothing to live for, nothing to look forward to. Do you get what I'm saying?
Oh, I totally do. And
yeah.
So
when we talk about the male loneliness crisis, I get a little bit frustrated at people who downplay that on the left because they think it's just a way of coddling or babying young white men, young straight men. No, it's not about that. Okay, there are people who are really struggling, and when you spiral like that, that could lead to a dangerous outcome. And people should be cared about in this country, regardless of what their demographic is. But anyway, go ahead, Cenk.
Yeah, so look, I say I'm not sure about that one because we don't know if that has anything to do with the shooting, but there are 2 trends here that seem to be related to this story. One is what Anna's mentioning, which is if he's socially isolated and lonely and going to 4chan and becoming nihilist, yeah, that's what a lot of people, they can't stand the Republican Party, can't stand the Democratic Party. Neither party ever delivers for them. And people are beginning to lose hope, right? And so And the reason for that is obvious. We've talked about it a million times on this show, but mainstream media has talked about it approximately 0 times, which is money in politics. And if you say, wait, what does that have to do with a shooting? Well, both sides are deeply corrupt. 95% of our politicians are utterly corrupt. So they never give you what they want. They both are in secret cooperation to give the donors exactly what they want.
They loot the country. They loot the country to the detriment of the American people.
Yeah.
Okay? And so I actually understand, even though I have not given into it, I personally understand that, I guess that urge or that temptation to become nihilistic.
Yeah, and so, and when nihilism turns towards violence, watch out, and that's crazy talk, and of course we shouldn't go in that direction. But at the same time, our politicians shouldn't be such crooks. I know they're going to continue to be, but so we have to change the rules. We have to get an amendment to end that. Wolfpack, check that out, fightcorruption.us. But guys, that's a long process. We should all get on that road. But I think what's driving people extra crazy is the gaslighting of mainstream media, where they're like, what do you mean? The politicians aren't corrupt. They don't represent a foreign government. No way. They don't represent the oil companies and the defense contractors. No way. They're having a debate. What's the debate on the government shutdown right now? There's no debate, guys. All there is cashing checks. So, and every time the media lies to you, people get more nihilistic and angrier and angrier. Okay, so now the last part of it. And by the way, that doesn't mean that you should shut down mainstream media or left-wing media or right-wing media, okay? None of us are responsible for lunatics in this country. It's a country of 330 million people. Now, the last part of the loss of faith in institutions, Anna, is anti-ICE. I've lost faith in institutions. What is anti-ICE? I don't know. Now, I get it that the guy's crazy because he's doing a rando shooting and shooting the people he didn't want to shoot, which is almost always what happens when you.
Well, we don't even know if he was shooting the people he didn't want to shoot. Let me give you a few more details about what his friend said, Jahn.
Okay, yeah, hold on. Before that, let me just finish this thought. Anti-ICE is a super weird message to put on. Like, if I don't like Doge, I wouldn't write anti-Doge. I'd write like Doge sucks or something, right? So, okay, and then what is with the writing the messages on the bullets? That's a thing that people do? Apparently now, I guess, maybe. And then leaves a note like, yes, it was just me. Okay, maybe, but just like Tyler Robinson with, it was definitely me. I would have gone back to get the rifle, but I didn't get a chance. It was me, trust me. Okay, all right, weird, but I guess. And so my point isn't that story isn't true. My point is that I don't know anymore. One, because none of our government never ever represents us, so I don't know what they're lying about. They're lying 24/7. And now under Trump, when he's like, oh, I didn't like the jobs report, I'm firing the guy who gives me the jobs report. That's one of dozens of examples. So how can you trust anything this government says?
I don't trust anything the government says, and that, by the way, includes political figures and leaders from both sides of the political aisle. But obviously things have been degraded even further in recent months, especially in regard to how Kash Patel has been carrying out his job as FBI director. But putting that aside for a second, let's talk a little bit about why people would turn away from politics altogether, not really have any political leanings, and give in to the temptation of nihilism. You're a young man in America. What is your place in the world? What do you have to look forward to? What can you work toward? And I'm not saying this as a disempowering message. It's just a reality now in the United States where the traditional, benchmarks that you can look forward to in your life are a lot more difficult, if not impossible, to attain. And that is leading to what I believe is a huge identity crisis or values crisis when it comes to young men and young people, period. There is no path anymore. There's no, I go to college, I get a good education, I get a great job, I work my way up, I save for retirement, I buy a house, I get married, I have kids. Now, if you go to college, you take out a ton of debt, you get out of college with a ton of debt. AI is probably going to make whatever education you got irrelevant, as coders are now starting to realize. Buying a home is nearly impossible. So these are real problems that have not been adequately addressed by our government. There's no question about that. On top of that, there is every incentive, Cenk, to not go out in the real world and form bonds with real people. People are atomized. They are alienated. They're sitting in front of a computer, constantly being bombarded with all sorts of content. Some of it is questionable, obviously, content. Some of it isn't. But algorithms make people more and more extreme in whatever it is that they're stuck in, whatever bubble they're stuck in. Well, that algorithm just tends to get more and more extreme. And you become more and more alienated with like at least half the country if you're consuming political content. There's no question about that. So like there's so many things happening at the same time. Failure of a government. No one trusts our institutions. People are atomized. People are becoming nihilistic because there's nothing to look forward to in their lives. And instead of focusing on how we can solve these issues, everyone's obsessed with, is it a D or is it an R? Is it a leftist or is it a right-wing extremist? Democrats versus Republicans. And I'm just done with the political hackery. I want real solutions, and I want people to stop exploiting these traumatic tragedies in this country for their own political purposes and aspirations. That's what the Trump administration is doing right now. I've seen Democratic figures do the same thing as well. We need leaders who actually give a damn about making this country better.
Yeah. A couple of quick points here. So I agree with what Anna is saying. And guys, this is not a left or a right issue. Is every shooter, mass shooter, political shooter, et cetera, in the country left or right? No. By definition, there's the right-wingers who shot up the church in Charleston and the El Paso, Texas, and the synagogues, and et cetera, et cetera. So the issue isn't whether you're on the left or right. The issue is whether you're doing political violence. Violence is the issue. So that's what we need to focus on. But nobody, and also all this mass surveillance, right? Oh, warrantless wiretapping, et cetera. And they can listen in on all our phones, and it's way worse than you realize on the phones, okay? And then did they ever catch anyone? No, they don't catch them anyway. So the surveillance isn't necessarily to catch people, it's to surveil us, the American citizens.
Yeah, exactly.
So our government is 100% dysfunctional, and our media is 100% dysfunctional, so that's why we're in the mess that we're in now.
A former friend of Joshua Hahn, not Kahn, told Ken Klippenstein, Josh was an edgelord who wanted someone to get blamed. I think he tried his best to write something goofy, meaning on the shell casing, to rile people up. And according to another friend who had known Hahn since age 8, he was never really into politics, especially not politicians. He was into politics only in the 4chan sense, contrarian, provocative, boundary pushing for laughs, not conviction. So one other thing that I'll just say, a note of caution, if you will, oftentimes when a criminal carries out some sort of terrible criminal act and it gets nationwide attention, you will inevitably hear interviews of people who were close to that person, maybe even family members, and they always say all sorts of things about how that individual was actually not violent at all, was actually a really great person and did really well in school. So, you know, you kind of have to take what the friends are saying with a little bit of a grain of salt, right? Because you usually hear all sorts of narratives that seem to contradict what the suspect did in their act of violence. But I do think it's important that Ken Klippenstein went out and actually spoke to people who knew this guy so we can get a little more clarity on what the motivations might have been. So we'll stay on this story and give you more details as it develops. But it is another example of a strange story where we don't really have all the answers. All right.
A lot of those are piling up.
They are.
Every time you ring the bell below, an angel gets his wings. Totally not true, but it does keep you updated on our live shows.